Thank you to those who joined. We'll just give it a couple of minutes before we start, see who else we get. Good morning, everyone. Thank you to those who joined. We'll just give it another minute or so before we begin. Excellent. Good. Okay, I think that will do from an attendee perspective. So let us begin. And again, thank you for joining the webinar this morning. Welcome. Happy Thursday morning. Um, just double check you're in the right session. So obviously everyone should see on screen single client view. Obviously going to be talking a lot about data, AI, business outcomes in the context of single client view, customer 360. So just double check you're in the right place and you're ready to listen. My name is George Marlow. I'm the Director of Client Engagements within the UK for Telefónica Tech. I've been at the company for about 3 years. My remit is overall accountability for engagements of our strategic client portfolio within the UK. I'm joined by Callum Ferguson, a principal AI consultant, also within the UK. Callum leads a large number of our strategic clients in the data engineering and an AI capability, for which some of those are in the legal space as well. Session is scheduled for about 40 minutes or 35 minutes about now. We're looking to do about 15 minutes of me talking. So I'm obviously aware of some of my client base being on the call as well. So, welcome to you. And for those that do know me, I will try and keep the talking to a minimum to let Callum show you the sexy stuff in the form of a demonstration, which will hopefully be a little bit more exciting than me drone on about some of the theory and the content behind it. There will be time for questions at the end, sort of 5 or 10 minutes. So please dump those in the chat as you go, and we'll either answer as we go or wait until the end. Everyone will be muted, so there's nothing personal about it, but just so that we can get through the content, obviously without being disturbed, background noise and whatnot. Session will also be recorded, so obviously you can digest in your own time afterwards, another day, or obviously share within your organisations or as appropriate to forward on, share the content. We will be obviously talking a lot about technology. We'll be talking a lot about data. We'll be talking about AI. The key thing here, obviously, with a bit of a disparate pool of attendees here, is to think about the way in which the technology is an enabler to driving business value, business outcomes. We always get sort of in the weeds, if you like, of how sexy and shiny some of the tech is, and obviously AI being a massive thing in today's day and age. But we need to make sure that they are driving value in the context of some form of ROI, whether that's explicit or tacit in nature. So please consider that in your real world situations. Good. So we will begin. We've covered this off. So that's fine. Mentioned some of this as well, so also all good there. Agenda. So there's a little bit of sort of slideware from the off from myself, talking about AI and data, foundational aspects that drive the AI conversation, how what this means for single client view, the benefit, the value of single client view, customer 360, both internal and external facing of your circumstances in your organisation. Callum will then do a demo leveraging Databricks that's going to sort of talk through and give some, I guess, real world aspect to how this can happen for you, obviously with a strong legal lens on all of this. Very, very quickly off the bat, just to give for those that aren't particularly familiar with Telefonica Tech, so we are a global firm. And our heritage is Telefonica, you may have heard of as the telecommunications company out of Spain. Telefonica originally, a number of years ago, incepted Telefonica Tech as a Spanish arm serving their Telefonica telco base with technology and information technology solutions. That then born Telefonica Tech UK and I, which obviously myself and Callum are part of. We are in the UK, obviously, across a number of different sites, as you can see there. From a capability perspective, this is our portfolio, for which I guess cognizant of the legal focus and the business value focus. The data and AI pillar is probably the closest map into the conversation we're having today. But you can see the broad spectrum of services that we offer across clouds, hybrid infrastructures, public private cloud, Dynamics, Salesforce, and cybersecurity, of course, with the overarching artificial intelligence across all the things that we do. Right, let's just begin. So, I think the starting point here is really thinking about, there's a lot of hype, around AI, there's a lot of hype around, how can an organisation, particularly in the legal sector, better understand their client base, but also prospective client base as well. So the key messaging here is sort of talking to the key and underpinning factors of the reality of what one needs in order to get to the next level and having the data to answer these customer related questions. Um, the reality is, and this is the interesting point, the reality is most organisations, quite frankly, I've worked with, and I've worked with tens and tens of organisations. Most of the organisations have the data they need to unlock that value. The reality is that it's pretty fragmented. It's across lots of systems, lots of applications, lots of teams, siloed. It's either decentralized or centralized. Some of that data is obviously structured, so in sort of database type formats, or in SaaS applications or whatever it may be. Some of it may be unstructured, so in obviously the legal sector, documentation or CCTV footage or whatever it may be. And in terms of accessing intelligence surrounding potential client portfolios and opportunities, it's pretty disparate. It's pretty hard to sort of lay a hand on in any stitched manner, if you like. And security as well. So I mean, there is a security theme through all of this, particularly around the AI front. And obviously in the legal sector, there's a high priority and high regulatory demand when it comes to confidentiality, GDPR, PII type handling. So the, the messaging really here is that you probably have, depending on your organisation, your maturity, but by and large, you probably have the data that you need in order to get started with some of these things around Client 360. The problem today is that you either don't know where it is, it's not structured in the right way, there isn't the governance around it, there isn't the clarity and the transparency around what is where and how we can directly leverage that to answer the questions that the business are looking for. So it's a bit of a scene set, I suppose. Um, these two slides here go off on a little bit of a tangent, but it's all for good reason. Again, around the sort of data and the AI foundational part. So have a think about where you as your organization sits on this curve. So essentially, if you read it left to right, normally you're looking at the reporting on the left through to decision intelligence on the right. The next slide also sort of reinforces this, but think about the reporting component where most firms are today is I leverage Tableau or Click or Power BI. I have a pool of data analysts or engineers that will run queries on my database, and it's somewhat time consuming. It's somewhat historically minded in the context of it's not predictive, right? It's running a query or analyzing a data point in a report based on data that exists, and it is meant to tell me a fact of the past. Don't get me wrong, important and necessary, but that's where most firms are at today, and it's very common to be honest across the industry. The point that it's trying to make here is that as you move from left to right hand side, we start moving on the predictive analytics into decision intelligence. So we're able to forecast, we're able to have that real time view on where things are at and the decisions that we can make to really drive value and answer the questions that are going to be more predictive in nature, right? And there's some examples on subsequent slides. Similar sort of lens as I mentioned, descriptive being on the sort of reporting front there, and as you move on to the right hand side, you enter into predictive and prescriptive. The idea of this slide is to sort of give a semblance to some of the benefits and values and deliverables that one can achieve by moving left to right. Why is this important? Well, as you'll see later from Callum, and the technologies that are leveraged to produce that sort of client 360 and know your customer view, we need to start moving from left to right hand side. At the end of the day, the real value that can be driven from an organisational perspective in predicting the future, which is essentially what we're talking about here, as crazy as it sounds, is about leveraging one's data on the left hand side in that descriptive manner, as most organisations operate today, moving the needle in order to leverage that data to answer questions of the future. That's the aim. That's the aim of the game. And then the customer 360 and know your customer sits all across this as well. Hopefully, some of those examples resonate. I think it's pertinent, particularly in the sector, and also just reflect on where you and your organisation, where you think you're at on this curve. Because, as I say, most of the organisations I work with, particularly in the sector, are either in the descriptive and diagnostic phase. Good. Why trusted and secure data matters. So this is more about the reinforcement of the data that you have and the data that you need, and the fact that one needs to have that secured and trusted in order to leverage it in the context of enabling that insight on the right hand side of the curve, as we saw in the last two slides. This slide is hopefully quite clear. On the left-hand side, it's representing some of those questions that a business executive or a business manager may be asking of data, of individuals, of teams. What you hopefully will notice, and I've tried to underline it to sort of call it out explicitly, but some of these things are internal and some of these things are external. So there is value, and there is very high value in having data associated with prospective opportunities and prospective clients, and leveraging the data that you have and hold of them in order to answer solid questions. In the middle of the screen, again, legal sector related, you can see some of the data sources. Again, the point being here that 3E is an example, which is pretty much in every legal firm organisation of some configuration, is supporting and would support the answering of some of those questions as well. But you need that data in the right shape, secured and governed appropriately, in order to then apply the tools and techniques Callum will talk about later to answer those really cool questions. The result, see the right hand side is sort of talking to the fact that we've got lots of data in lots of different places, multiple versions of the truth, and the confidence the confidence around security and trust of that data is somewhat questionable. So we do need to have those solid data foundations in order to drive the outcomes we're looking for. I will move on. Single client view. So this is our as Telefónica Tech's perspective on the key pillars that drive single client view and customer 360. So client intelligence, commercial intelligence, relationship, and operational. So I'm not going to read all of this out because it will ruin your Thursday morning, I imagine. But hopefully the point is quite clear. There is lots of opportunity when you consider these four pillars of client view. Again, the key thing here being internal and external as well. But this needs to be by design, security by design. So, when we look at role-based access, RBAC, ABAC, ethical walls, auditability, mentioned about the regulation considerations, conflict of interest is obviously a key thing here. So we need to bake all of these considerations in by design into the conversation. Client 360 becomes the foundation for the way in which a business can operate within the sector. Know your customer. I think there's in our experience, there's a bit of preconception that know your customer is more of a sort of compliance demand, which I mean, arguably it is, particularly and again in the sector. Know your customer can absolutely be a strategic business asset. So this slide is talking to why that is and some of the considerations. I would look less on the left-hand side and more on this sort of section here. What you'll see later from Callum is the way in which you can query through an interface, and it's pretty cool. You can query data internally and externally of your environment, of your ecosystem, to answer some of the questions or some of the themes on that particular section there, as I have highlighted at the moment. The role of AI. So I guess considering this directly from a practicality perspective of how artificial intelligence plays into this, I think most of you, and some of the audience here will resonate with that traditional model perspective of, if a question is asked of a team, of a stakeholder, of a board member, there is a journey today of that question being answered or a decision being made associated with it. That's what this sort of flow is trying to represent here. The idea is that in an ideal world, when we're a fully AI organization or AI enabled organization, yes, you're highly likely and you will want to, especially in the legal sector, to have a human in the loop type situation. But the point being that where a question is asked, there is a trusted data platform with trusted data of secure nature as well, and then an AI interface, either via natural language search or natural language query or other means that Callum will talk about later, in order to drive that action. As the cliche goes, indecision is worse than no decision at all. So hopefully this is resonating with all here. Just moving on. Innovation, security, compliance. So I guess bringing it back round circle to the fact that we need strong data foundations in order to drive the AI sort of conversation, and obviously the customer 360 that goes around it. These are some of the key aspects, key components that we would consider at a super high level. Again, the devil's in the detail, that enable us to have that confidence and trust in the data in order to drive the next set of conversations. So governance, security, and AI considerations is listed there. Not going to read those out. Data ownership and quality, I think, is a massive thing. I would challenge you to consider how you perceive your data quality within your organisation. So obviously, sort of data quality being a subset of data governance in the context of data strategy. Consider how poor or strong data quality may influence the ability to leverage data in a trusted fashion for AI use. I would suggest that strong data quality is required. Callum, do you want to just talk a little bit to the technicalities, and then we'll move on to the demo?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, George. So I'm going to talk now about the technology we use to bring to life a single client view and empower decision making. And here, this is Databricks. So that's a unified data and AI platform that a lot of our clients are using already. And the advantages of this are that it's multi-cloud. It doesn't matter if you're on Azure, AWS, or GCP, you can get this deployed without any additional infrastructure. And even if you're already using Databricks and already have data, it's not going to impact that. In fact, that's the first step towards building your single client view. All the other services that I'm going to show within the demo are also wrapped up into this platform. So that includes the web app itself, as well as the model endpoints and things like that. And this whole platform will scale as your business demands grow. Over the top of your data sits Unity Catalog, allowing the governance and security controls that George talked about. So, for example, if you have geographical limitations around who should access what client data, then that's all already baked into the platform. And we have access to agents, and these can be model agnostic. So if you prefer to use Claude for document summarization and GPT for coming up with some sort of risk analysis, then it's very flexible. we can tailor that to whatever your needs are. In this case, we have 3 such agents. So we have an agent, all 3 of these are going to external data sources, which have actual data about potential clients. On the left-hand side here, we have the news analysis agent, and that goes to Paragon and tries to find out recent information in the news about whoever you want to maybe on board. The second one we have is sanctions screening agent, which accesses DiligSense for any relevant information around sanctions there. And on the right-hand side, we have an agent that goes and brings in information from Companies House and finds out anything to do with the corporate registry, which may be relevant to analyzing the clients. And then that information is all brought together to come up with some sort of assessment or potential decision around what you should do next with that client. And this can be easily extended to any other sort of external source of information and API that may be important to the day-to-day running of your business. Lastly, we use Genie. So George talked about how you can query the data with natural language. You can go to Genie, ask questions in plain English, and then that will go and query your data without any coding required. And that data may have already been processed through your data platform and modeled in a way which answers those key business decisions. So yeah, that's a bit about the platform itself. I'm now going to go and jump into the demo. So this demo is split up into 2 key parts. It answers the question, what happens if I have a new client that's come to me with a matter that I wish to onboard, and how can I decide whether that's the right decision? And then the second question is, how can we look through our existing clients to come up with new opportunities and make decisions around that? So let's start with the first part. Let's say Tesco, for example, has come to us with a new matter, and we need to make a decision. Is this the right client to engage with? Is this the right matter to take on board? I can enter in Tesco here and start my investigation. And this goes away and it talks to those agentic workflows that I mentioned earlier. It will go through and pull that information from DiligSense, from Companies House, and bring all that together into and present all the findings relevant to that. This may take a little bit of time, maybe a couple of minutes, but hopefully you'll see that it is quicker than going to those places yourself and doing that research. So just give this a couple more minutes. And for the purposes of this demo, this is all real information that it's gathering from these sources, and we are hooked up to those APIs. So we can see we've got the findings now from those agents. We've got the sanctions screening agent. Now, if I have a look in those findings, I can see, okay, nothing was flagged as a concern here, and so we're happy with that. The next one is the corporate's registry information. And actually, it does turn out that there has been some sort of history of insolvency or charges registered. And so we may need to take a second look at that. And this isn't necessarily making that decision for you, but it's giving you enough information to make that decision yourself and prioritize what's important to you out of these findings. And then lastly, we have the news analysis agent. And so that's gone away to find out recent news about Tesco. And it's mostly about share prices and things like that. But if there's been any controversy in the news recently, that may show up here and may be something that you need to take a look over before you make a decision. And once you've got that information all in one place, you can then generate the final risk assessment. And you can see, yep, it seems based on the findings from those different sources that Tesco is a low-risk client. There was no issues around sanctions. There may have been some slight issues coming from the corporate registry that are worth a second look, but overall the recommendation is to proceed. And again, this can be tailored based on what's important. So, so yeah, we've got the key findings here. Now for the second part, which is to look at your existing clients and see what you can find out there. So first I'm going to show the client analytics dashboard, which brings all the information from all the clients into one page. We've got some KPIs at the top here, and we can see that perhaps the client concentration is a bit of a concern. This is showing that our top 3 clients make up for 82% of the revenue. And so that may present a significant risk if we were to say lose one of those clients. And we may want to grow one of our smaller clients to prevent that risk. So you can see here which of those clients are generating that revenue. as well as the meta volume associated with each one of those. We can see the revenue by industry sector, and then we can see a total list of those. And so out of the 5 active clients that we have here, the one with the lowest revenue is Gamma. So we may look to them for a new opportunity. If I click view here, I go into that client 360 view of Gamma, and that brings together all the information that may come from those external sources, as well as the internal systems that you may have to track finances and CRM data and things like that, such as Intap. We can see, however, that when we ran a risk assessment in the past, they were actually pretty high risk. There were some sanction issues and other things that were flagged. And so maybe this isn't the best client to grow. So how do we find out the best opportunity? Well, this is where we may turn to something like Genie. And that, as I mentioned before, is that querying tool where you can talk to it in natural language and find out information from that data. So if I go, who are our 3 lowest revenue clients and what was their risk? I can ask that question. This app will send that to Genie, and then Genie will build out that query, generate the code for you without you having any knowledge of that, and then get that information. And that may be from the different systems as they've been landed into your data platform, that risk information, as well as that financial information or any others important. So as demos go, it doesn't always behave exactly how you want. But the point I was gonna make here is if we look to the client 360 for Acme, for example, they're a bit lower revenue than the other 2 clients. And then that we saw in the top 3. And they also had a low risk profile. So the lower out of the 3 lowest revenue clients that you would have seen here. There were no issues with sanctions and many of the other things. So that doesn't present the same compliance risk that you may have seen from Gamma. We can see that they're quite a big company. Things like their financial performance. We can see that recent media seems to have been mostly positive, but also looking out to those external sources, we have identified opportunities. We can see that there have been data privacy issues, and they may need regulatory advisory around that. We can see due to some patents they put out recently, they may require some legal services for IP litigation. If I keep going down, I can see, yes, we have engaged with them in the past around those sorts of things, around IP regulatory and so on. And we can even see that we've got the contact information of who we need to talk to make that happen. So hopefully you can see how we've reduced the amount of manual work that you'll need to typically do that research and investigation, come up with those assessments and reports, and document and track that information. It's all in one place, allowing you to not have the need to go to the different reports you may have had in the past and make those decisions significantly faster. Thanks. Back over to you, George.
Cool. Thank you, Colin. Just reshare my screen. Super, as you say, demos don't always go to plan, right? But look, I mean, I hope it's clear from that demo there by Callum is that this isn't magic. At the end of the day, that this is predicated on robust data. In this case, a data lakehouse. Different ways in which one can order their data. So that's not the purpose of the detail of this webinar, but it's predicated on solid data. So we can talk about machine learning and agentic and AI and customer 360 and all the fantastic buzzwords that surround some of the modern conversations, but we do need good data. So hopefully, some of the material in the last half an hour has sort of reiterated that. That being said, however, and this is something I discuss with some of the CFOs within the legal space at the moment. Most firms can actually start today. Most firms, as I started with on slide 1, if you remember, is that you probably have the data. It's probably just fragmented in the wrong place, in the wrong shape, etc. We need to get that data in a good shape. Number one, in order to start applying some of these more modern techniques. Minimal viable governance is another consideration as well, right? So, I spoke with a global CFO in one of the Magic Circle firms 2 weeks ago, And the question that he posed to me was, we've got a data strategy that's work in progress, and I've been told it's going to take 9 months to complete. Does that mean I can't do any of this? And frankly, it was a data platform and an agentic AI conversation. Um, entirely not. Entirely not. You need to select and agree. As a Moscow type prioritization, one of the key must-have, absolute mandate necessities of governance, whether that's delivery governance or data governance or some of the other considerations that enable you to start. Obviously, in the legal sector, regulation considerations are key, as mentioned earlier, so that does need to be taken into account. But there is absolutely not a need to wait months and months before some of these conversations can happen. It's about balance. Balance is key. So, in terms of if you are thinking about starting on this journey of some of the things raised today, consider the business problems. Work with the business to truly understand concerns and issues and questions that they are trying to ask of the data that may or may not exist today, as again mentioned previously. Identify those high value data domains, deliver incrementally. Agile. Hopefully, some of you are aware of agile and the principles thereof, but these things don't need to be big bang either. Data is quite a difficult one to deliver truly agile because we need the data together, we need a robust foundation, we need it to be stitched together. This isn't app dev, this isn't building a website. It's a slightly different beast, but one can still deliver incrementally. Single client view, it's a good practical demonstration of how these things can come together across data and AI. So hopefully the demo has helped reinforce that as well. And then from a closing perspective, we'll cover off a little bit of Q&A. So please, if not already, start dumping in some questions, and Callum and I will answer that over the next few minutes before we close. Whilst that is happening in the background, in terms of sort of call to action, what's next? Obviously, variety of audience here on the call. From a demo and accelerator perspective, we have a number of data platform accelerators built on Databricks, both Azure and AWS. And of course, you've seen the demo today around Customer 360. So if you want a free of charge complimentary demo, then by all means reach out to us, and we will be very happy to support that conversation. George.Marlow is George.Marlow Telefonica Tech, Telefonica Tech UK, pardon, is probably the easiest way to proceed on that basis, and happy to arrange that. And then for sort of general context of some of the other webinars coming up from Telefonica Tech in the UK over the coming weeks, we've got something around clouds and cloud control, sort of talking around FinOps and migrations across the public and private cloud spaces. And of course, for those aware of the Databricks ecosystem, the Databricks Summit 2026 is happening right now. So our CTO and our head of data engineering and architecture they're both out somewhere in the States. I forget, I think it moves Seattle perhaps at the moment. And they will be communicating to the community towards the end of June, a couple of weeks after they come back. So they will be advertised for another webinar, and by all means, take the time to join if you can. Back to Q&A. Let's see what we've got. Okay. How much data needs to be unified before firms start seeing value? Callum, do you want to have a go at that one?
Yeah, of course. So, of course, it's great to have unified data already, especially as you're not external sources that we saw today aren't necessarily going to have access to that data. But there's no reason why you can't start using things like the agentic workflows that I showed today and start getting access to those APIs and bring that external data in to start analyzing any new clients or even existing clients that you may wish to make a new opportunity for. And that means you don't necessarily have to have that data today. But also, if you do have data as well, even a small amount, that's great. We can start building out that single client view piece by piece, prioritizing the most important pieces of information to making those decisions. So hope that answers the question.
Cool, thank you, Callum. What we've got here, we've got, what does trusted data actually mean in practice? Okay, no, it's a good question. So um, there was a slide earlier on that sort of talked to some of those key underlying principles around data that obviously enable us to move the needle, so to speak, in descriptive to prescriptive, and sort of start to leverage agentic and AI techniques. What I would probably say in answer to the question around, the trusted data, I mean, we need common definitions, glossary. So from a data strategy perspective, finance might mean, something by attrition, as an example, or debtors, or whatever it may be. Um, the HR team might think something differently. A business leader somewhere else might think something differently as well. So common definitions, glossary terms, data ownership, data stewardship, data quality. Spoke about that earlier. If your data and the validation rules associated with inputting data into applications and systems is questionable, then you're going to have a data quality issue, which obviously undermines the trust of that data. Security is obviously a key factor, particularly in this regulated environment. And I think lineage is probably a fair point as well. So, can one trace a particular data point all the way through to source? Good. One more time. Time for one more, I think. To what degree is all of this approach customizable, e.g., in terms of your reference architecture, i.e., Databricks versus Microsoft Fabric? Okay. Callum, do you wanna have a stab at that? I can, but I'll leave that with you from a technical perspective.
uh, I mean, yeah, it's sort of certainly doable. For me personally, when I've worked between the two, so I am very familiar with both. I found that the Databricks offering in terms of AI and building applications is a lot more mature. It's a lot easier to host those, have those nice and flat interfaces, bring that all together. But there's no reason why you can't start building this in Fabric as well. It has similar sort of tooling around governance and things like that that you can use from Microsoft. It has the reporting solutions. It has the way of accessing uh, things like those models that I showed before, and using those to then access things like the APIs and bring all that data in. I mean, it follows largely the same concepts. So um, yeah, I would say it is very customizable. We apply the same principles and have can build something fairly similar to what you just saw today.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, I think, I feel like on the BBC a little bit, there are alternatives available type situation. I mean, we are a primary partner to the likes of Microsoft and AWS, particularly. Databricks being typically the tooling that we leverage upon those cloud platforms. Fabric, obviously being a Microsoft thing in itself, is obviously something that we do quite regularly as well from a delivery perspective. In terms of the customization component, um, the whole point of our framework and our accelerator, for which obviously Callum's talked through, that reference architecture, is speed to market, time to market. So we have like 20 years of experience in delivering data platforms, data lakehouses, and obviously over recent years in developing the AI solutions and ML frameworks that are joined to that. So when we think about metadata orchestration, when we think about standardized patterns, one from an ingestion perspective of that data all the way through to created models, dimensional models, star schemas, and obviously the reporting that may be in Power BI or by other means as a sort of separate consideration. Of course, ML and AI playing a part of that, whether it's in Genie or by other means such as Copilot or Sigma or say an array of technology choices. The reference architecture is a reference architecture. We have lots of patterns associated with these things, but they're fully customizable. The whole point is that we can deliver time to market, and we're talking about weeks, not months. So hopefully that answered that particular question. Just see if there's any others in the chat with about 30 seconds to go. Super. Well, I think we'll leave it there, just about on time. Thank you ever so much for joining us this morning. Hopefully, it's been useful. Look forward to sharing the uh, recording, and have a great rest of the day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.